DPS, damage dealers, ranged or melee. They make the bosses go down, obsess over upgrading their purples, and stand in fire because, trust me bro, it's like healable damage, just deal with it. They are, after all, the most popular role in World of Warcraft because, well, that's simply how the game is made. In our standard dungeon comps, we have 3 DPS compared to 1 heal or tank. 10-man raids see 1 to 2 tanks, 2 healers and 6 DPS, and 25-man raids 2 tanks, 4 to 6 healers, and somewhere around 18 DPS. That's a lot of damage people pushing damage, blasting away, and competing for the prestigious spot of top DPS. And the talking point of which class and specialization will be the best has always been popular in WoW. In original Wrath, we had the term Flavor of the Month reroller. People were able to hop between an established main character and a freshly dinged 80 who had received buffs on the latest patch, thanks to how generous this expansion is with gear and catch-up mechanics. Over on retail, bringing the best performing DPS is very much required for the toughest mythic raiding content. You are simply making things far harder than they need to be by bringing something which you and your raid team realize is currently performing subpar. And these days we have amazing tools to analyze and predict performance of any given class or spec well before you even set foot in a raid. Stimming gear has been a thing on retail for some time now, and I think it's gained a ton more popularity now in Wrath. With a few buttons you can export your gear and then swap around gems, enchants, tier set, modify fight length, the number of adds that are present, any metric you can think of, push a few buttons and it will estimate whether or not the changes you have made are a DPS gain or a DPS loss. This all makes it very easy to find out what your best spec is, what stats to prioritize, and how to set up your talents, and just to be, well, the best version of your class and spec that you possibly can be. And that is what most players do, but some of them don't. Some players don't care that they should be playing this meta spec. Some players know what they like to play and have decided that they want to prove that their chosen specialization, despite not being popular, can perform well and shine if they put the effort in. These are the players that turn up to raid as Frost Mage and say, no, I didn't just come from Arena, this is my PvE spec. The people who remember Blood DK from launch of Wrath back in 2008 and want to relive that, and the rogues that are mad enough to turn down assassination and combat in favor of subtlety. Join me today as we look into the world of the players that min-max the specs, which are usually considered complete memes. First of all, let's get a few things out of the way. I'll of course be using data from Warcraft Logs Classic here. Remember, parses are done on a spec by spec basis. There's going to be a rank 1 affliction lock and there's going to be a rank 1 BM hunter. There'll be a very big difference between the two, but there will be a best player for each of the specializations. I'm going to be looking for people who legitimately main these specs, not somebody who's in a really good guild with fast clear times, who played something off meta for fun and it looks good because they're in a good guild. I'm going to try and pick people who have exclusively raided as these specs since Ulduar. I'm also going to go and try and find people who have cleared the content on the hardest difficulty if I can. This is also going to involve a bunch of guesswork as to how they min-max, due to the fact Warcraft Logs doesn't show you their exact talent and glyph breakdown, it only shows you where they've spent their talent points. But I'll be taking some educated guesses and talking you through the potential benefits of bringing these specs to the raid. It's also worth a quick mention as to the generic reasons why these specs are not usually brought. It practically goes for all of them, so I'll just put it here right at the start. The first reason is it's a PvP dedicated specialization, and you have multiple other ones in some cases which perform way better, or it offers little to no utility which somebody else can't do better. In short, if you're playing one of these, you have a very nice patient guild that doesn't mind you wanting to try something different, so power to you and your guild if you're able to make it work. Right then, let's make a start with the Frost Mage. So to put in perspective how popular this spec is in PvE, over the past 2 weeks, Fire Mages have seen around 380,000 parses, a parse being 1 kill of a boss by somebody playing that specialization. Arcane has seen 175,000 parses, and Frost is about 1.2 thousand. Most of the top parses for Fire on complete raids are reaching the 9k mark, Frost is around 6k. There's also only 2 complete raid passes for Frost for some reason. There should be more numbers than that in total for complete raids, but anyways, that's what we have here. You know, when I was doing the class review videos for Wrath, I nearly made a section about Frost mages in PvE, because on the surface, they do have quite a bit going for them. I don't recall Frost mage being played seriously at any point in original Wrath for raiding, other than it being part of a Frostfire spec, which benefits from both Frost and Fire talents to buff up Frostfire Bolt. But that's not what we want here though, we want somebody who's actually playing Frost mage. Utility wise, they bring your pretty standard mage kit, the table, spell steal, interrupts and so on, and for Frost in particular they bring 5% spell crit, which they have to stack up by casting 5 Frost spells when a Warlock can do it with 1 Shadow Bolt. They also bring a mana regen buff, which is fine and you generally want 2 of these in your raid, though they're usually done by some combination of Shadow Priest, Survival Hunter and Ret Pally. From what I could find on logs, the Frost mages passing 100s or high 90s regularly opted for an 18053 build, though the thing I think is most interesting about Frost mages are actually their glyphs, because they have some really powerful ones. Frostbolt adds a further 5% damage to your main spell, but it doesn't slow anymore. Eternal Winter makes your water elemental into a pet instead of a cooldown, and there is also a glyph of Ice Lance that causes this spell to do 4 times damage instead of 3 times against higher level targets. However, it didn't look as though this was taken, because things are Frost procs were being used on Frost Firebolt and Deep Freeze from what I could tell looking at the logs. So they're probably taking Molten Armor as a glyph instead for the extra crit, because it's not like you can benefit from Frost Nova Shattering in PvE. Speaking of Deep Freeze, it's actually a pretty big nuke in PvE content, as when used against targets who are permanently immune to stuns, it's the highest base damage spell in the entire game. Frost is also a lot more durable than most mage specs, which have a tendency to fall over when getting hit by a lot of damage, thanks to Ice Barrier. They also have Cold Snap to reset cooldowns, and you'll get 2 Icy Veins in a fight. Over in the Arcane Tree, it's pretty standard stuff here, going down to Torment the Weak, which adds a ton more damage to your main spells. Overall, I'd imagine Frost is pretty straightforward to play, similar to most mage specializations, except now you have a pet to manage as well. Next, a Blood DK, a spec that was legitimately very good at the launch of original Wrath, but you couldn't really go wrong playing anything with a DK because they were insanely overpowered, so I'm not really sure how much that means. Us playing on a final patch version of Wrath now has not treated this specialization all too well though. Warcraft logs list Frost DKs as having about 360,000 passes over the last 2 weeks, Unholy about 237,000, and Blood, well, actually it's a little bit complicated. The Warcraft logs recognizes Blood as a tanking spec. Unbelievable, I know, but in order for a log to count as Blood, the player needs to hit a certain damage taken threshold. And that's not really what we're looking for. We want people DPSing as Blood. Under the Warcraft log spec definition, they have a Runeblade spec, which is either Frost or Unholy off-tank, or those with a majority point spent in Blood that do not meet the damage taken threshold to count as a tank. I guess that's about as close as we're going to get here. So if we swap to the tank and DPS filter, we can see that apparently there were 38,000 Runeblade DK passes over the past 2 weeks. Now I'm just going to say it, there is absolutely nowhere near that many people playing Blood DPS. I literally refuse to believe it, and there's going to be tons of off-tanks and just other weird specs mixed in there, but hey, this is what we've got to work with. Damage-wise for complete raids, there's quite a mix of Unholy and Frost over their 8k mark at the moment. Runeblade, however, is again kind of all over the place, between 4k to near 6k. Again, there's quite a variety of different roles being shown here, I think, so it's a bit messy. Spec-wise though, Blood DPS seem to mainly go 51-0-20, bringing the 10% attack power buff, as well as Unholy Frenzy, which you already know they're going to be using on themselves, of course. For glyphs, I would hazard a guess at Disease, because Blood DKs need diseases running these days for sure, as well as perhaps Dancing Rune Weapon, extending its duration from 12 seconds to 17, seems fairly decent with its short cooldown. And then perhaps Death Strike to amp up the damage from your main rune spender a little bit. In the Unholy tree, from logs I was able to find from Blood players who were DPSing, Necrosis and Bloodcake Blade are taken to add some extra damage from auto attacks. Blood should also be using a two-hander, since they have a talent that boosts damage by 4% when they're using them. Also towards the bottom of the tree is the talent Blood Gorged. Above 75% health, your attacks do 10% more damage, so Blood DK DPS on priority for heals then, for sure. As for the rotation, not anything too out of order for what you'd expect from a DK. Apply diseases, keep them running, spend runes on abilities, and spend runic power on Death Coil. Also, Blood DK gains some extra benefits from cleaving with Heart Strike too. Next, we have the Beast Mastery Hunter. Imagine this was one of the consistently top DPS in the game for the whole of TBC. As for Beast Mastery's popularity, over the past 2 weeks, survival's seen around 350,000 parses, marksmanship about 50k, and BM about 2.5 thousand. DPS wise on complete raids, top survival hunters are pushing over the 8k mark at the moment, whilst BM has seen a few hunters hit over 6,000. Utility wise, Beast Mastery actually does have something that raid teams might want, and that is 3% damage, which otherwise is done by Ret Pally or Arcane Mage. For hunters we have 2 talent trees to go over, their pets first of all. So usually pet talents look something like this. You use a wolf that has Furious Howl, and you take points down to Call of the Wild and pet scaling from Wild Hunt. For Beast Mastery you get 4 extra points, and I would spend them like this, getting a 2nd point in Wild Hunt and 2 out of 2 in Shark Attack. All in all, that's 15% more attack power scaling and 6% extra to all damage caused. For glyphs, probably nothing too exciting. You have a lot less buttons to press as Beast Mastery and spend way more time just steady shotting. Kind of like TBC, actually. So I'm guessing Serpent Sting, Steady Shot, and Bestial Wrath to reduce its cooldown. In the Hunter talent tree, most opted for something along the lines of 53-14-4, which I've put together this for, getting all the big pet buffing talents such as Unleash Fury for extra damage, Frenzy for attack speed, and Kindred Spirits for even more damage. Longevity alongside the Bestial Wrath glyph should put its cooldown to just over 1 minute, which is a pretty good effect for both the hunter and the pet. In the marksman tree, Go for the Throat has been taken to give your pet more focus to spend on bite, and in survival just flat damage from improved tracking. Want to know one of the key takeaways I found about BM hunters in Wrath? Damn, exotic pets suck, like they're really bad. Everyone I found on logs is still using wolves thanks to them having ferocity talents and ferocious roar. You'd have hoped BM in Wrath with a new end of talent tree ability would be all about spirit beasts and dinosaurs and chimera, but nope, still just using a wolf like every other hunter is. Rotation wise, there's definitely less going on than either of the other specs, using Arcane Shot on cooldown, keeping up Serpent Sting, and steady shotting in between. Finally, we have Sub Rogue, which was by far the hardest to actually find people who legitimately play it in PvE content. As for popularity, over the past 2 weeks, Assassination Rogue had near enough 350,000 parses logged, Combat 140k or so, and Sub had sub 1k. When I looked, it was around 650. In fact, it's the least popular DPS, a term which I use lightly here, specialization in the game. Where the top assassination rogues in the world are pushing over 8,000 damage over a complete raid, Sub is, I don't know, there's 3 complete raids logged, so yeah, make of it what you will, I guess. On the utility side, there's Hemorrhage, which is a unique buff and technically a DPS increase, though I just think a really tiny one. Also for this, we may have to let Google Translate take the reins a bit due to logs being in foreign language. For glyphs, I've gone with Rupture, Slice and Dice, and Eviscerate. Over in the talents, 20-0-51 seem to be the go-to, taking some core damage improving abilities in the assassination tree, including Blood Spatter. Over in the sub-tree, however, it's like we're doing a challenge to find talents which actually do affect your DPS in some way. Dirty Deeds adds an execute phase for rogues. When targets are under 35% health, they take 20% extra damage from abilities. Deadliness adds 10% more attack power, and Sinister Calling adds a huge 15% extra agility. Honor Among Thieves is where most of your combo points should be coming from. 1 combo point per second, as long as somebody's critting, which they probably will be, sounds pretty decent to me. Slaughter from the Shadows is another big talent, reducing the energy cost on backstab and ambush by 20, as well as increasing all damage by 5%. At the bottom of the tree is of course Shadow Dance, allowing the use of stealth ability for 6 seconds. As far as I could tell, people were using backstab as their main combo builder too here, which was interesting, as well as getting to use ambush during Shadow Dance. Other than that, it appears to be balancing combo point gains, maintaining Slice and Dice, applying Rupture if the target will live long enough, and eviscerating any extra points away. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the sub-rogues I found were not doing expose armor most of the time. I mean, come on, you aren't bringing a sub-rogue for utility, are you? All in all, you can tell why certain specs are just played way less, but at the end of the day, if nobody minds, and the bosses are going down, what's the big deal, right? I think trying to figure out and min-max something on your own is always really interesting across so many different game genres, and picking something off meta kind of allows you to do that once again. There will be dozens of guides out there for assassination rogues, affliction locks, and holy DKs, but how many people are really trying to push the limits of BM Hunter or a Frost Mage in PvE? Not that many. Either way, I thought this would be a good topic to cover as something a little bit different, and show the side of Wrath of the Lich King DPS which you've probably never seen before. Let me know whether you've tried any of these specs or played alongside them yourself in PvE, or just given something off meta a go and how that went for you. And, as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. I'll see you all on the next one very soon.